Well, good morning and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Eric Little. I'm the Chief Development Officer for Right at Home. Thanks so much for joining us today. This will be a quick reintroduction for those of you that have inquired about the Right at Home franchise opportunity in the past, and maybe that wasn't the right time for you, but now certainly could be. So we got a lot going on. We do have a lot of content to go through today as well, and so I'll go through that as quickly as we can. The way that we've got the webinar set up is that we've got about 30 to 40 minutes of content, and then we'll have time for Q&A as well. And so I think with the screens here in front of me, I'm going to be able to see those questions pop up as they come in. If for some reason they can't, or if it's something I know I'm going to cover later in the webinar, I'll put the questions toward the end. So we'll just see how that goes. I do encourage you, as you have questions, do type them in though, so that we can make this a two-way dialogue as much as possible. Like many of you, we are now much more experienced with Zoom than we ever have been as a brand, and it's created some opportunities for us as well. All right, so you see here on the screen, we're going to talk franchising, and we're going to talk about senior care, and I've got a guy on a bicycle here. Well, that's not just any guy. That's Matt Field. He happens to be one of our franchisees in Chicago and been a franchisee for several years. But the reason I like this image is because it really gets at the heart of what we're looking for in a franchisee, right? There's an element of competition in being a business owner. There's an element of being, training and preparing. And, it's not just, Matt didn't just show up that day and get on a bike and ride. He trained ahead of time for it. And so the steps to owning your own business are similar to that, right? You have to train, you have to prepare, you have to probably make some mistakes along the way. And so that image really does capture, what that journey looks like for many of our franchise owners. The phrase "success with significance," that's one that we trademarked many years ago, and again, that really does describe who we are looking for in a franchisee. We're looking for folks that want to be successful by whatever their definition of success is. Usually, there's a financial component of some kind. But that's usually not enough, right? Most of our franchisees, they want to do something that matters. They want to do something that provides that just something significant in their life. They want their business to matter. They want the time they spend working to matter. And so they're looking for a business, something like this for them that allows them to get back to the community. Over on the left-hand side of that slide, you'll see some various rankings. Not all of them are up there, but we put those up there just because the third party recognition is really nice for you as a prospective franchisee to be able to see that these magazines, Forbes and Entrepreneur and Franchise Business Review, Franchise Times is another one. Every year we get good recognition from those folks, and they look at things like growth rates, and they look at continuity rate, how many franchises opened and closed in the last year or two or three, depending on the magazine. And so there's a lot of data that goes into getting those rankings that you see there on the left-hand side of that slide. And so that, I think, from an entry point perspective as a prospective franchisee, provides you at least some sort of third-party recognition and endorsement. All right, so we've got quite a bit of content here, and those of you who are professional presenters are going to see my next slide, and you're going to think, "Oh my gosh, you should never put that many. Words on the slide." So sorry if you're one of those people. And I'm going to get into the business model here in a few minutes, but we really I'm going to pat ourselves in the back. We don't do this very well as a company, frankly, but we have really responded to this COVID-19 crisis in a really big way. And I think that when these kinds of crises come up, whether it's a person that we're talking about or whether it's a company that we're talking about, the crises tend to reveal who we really are, right? And so what has happened in this case, there was no playbook for what happens with COVID-19, right? It wasn't like we had a checklist already developed at the corporate office how to deal with it. We had to spring into action. And I think that, there certainly are companies out there that have embraced this crisis and done what they could to help out. And there may be some companies that kind of cover their ears and eyes and just wait for it to be over. We definitely are in the former there. We definitely really address this head on. So I want to hit a few of these. I probably won't have time to hit them all, but one of the things that we've done, and keep in mind, for those of you that don't know, we have almost 500 operating territories here in the U.S. and another 120 or 30 or so outside the U.S. So we're in 8 countries total. So there are a lot of franchisees out there that are really depending on us to provide communication and information and updates about how to operate during this crisis. And I'll pause there for a second, because one of the best things about being in the senior care business is that we are an essential business. And so what that means is, if you've got if you've got friends who own businesses that are restaurants, or or other kinds of businesses where they're shut down, that obviously is a remarkable thing that's happened to those businesses. We stayed open during that time, and so it's one of the best things about senior care is that it's an essential business. And so, can't predict the future. I don't have a crystal ball to say exactly what's going to happen, but if something like this were to happen again, I think I'd rather be in this kind of a business rather than one of these other ones that's going to be shuttered. Okay, so what did we do? That first bullet point there, the weekly town hall and state specific conference calls. So, being a big franchise system, we have all kinds of things and ways that we communicate to our franchisees. What we recognized early on, first part of March, was that those mechanisms that we had, those ways of communicating with franchisees, those were going to have to be accelerated, right? We were going to have to talk to our franchisees in different ways to be able to make sure that they got all of the updates from us that they could get. And of course, we were behind the scenes reading and talking to people and getting involved with trade associations and getting involved with lobbyists, all kinds of things as all this stuff was going on. And so we had to get this information out to the franchise system. So one of the things we started doing was we put together a weekly town hall Zoom, just like you're seeing here. And what's interesting about this, being the big company that we are, we would take careful anytime we do these, which was usually once a quarter, maybe monthly sometimes. There was a lot of planning. There was a lot of stuff that just preparation that went into these things, right? And all of a sudden, we didn't have that kind of time, and so we started putting these weekly town halls on, right away. And the idea was we wanted to make sure the franchisees were all connected, not only with us, but with each other as well. And so that's gone really well. We have one today, as a matter of fact. And so we're continuing to do those. We also, that's the national meeting. We also did state specific conference calls and Zoom meetings as well. So for the first probably 6 weeks or so, there were weekly state meetings as well that the senior leadership team and the business coaches also attended. And again, it's one thing to hear from the national CDC, but each local health department also has its own guidelines and things that they're doing to keep their people safe. And so it's important to have that local connection so the franchisees can share information back and forth as well. The next one talks about HCAOA. That's Home Care Association of America. That's our largest industry trade association. So our CEO is on the board of that association. Our founder was actually also the co-founder of that association back when it was called the National Private Duty Association. So there's been all kinds of work at that level, just as the CARES Act and other stimulus packages were pushed through. There was a lot of conversation on that part of it. I'll come down a little bit. You see PPE there, direct sourcing of PPE. So PPE is personal protective equipment. And so again, one of the very first decisions that this COVID-19 task force that you see in that bullet a couple above there talked about was we have to get this PPE in the hands of our franchisees so that they've got the equipment necessary for their caregivers to keep them as safe as possible and to try to limit the spread of the disease, because we're taking care of the very population that's been most affected by this pandemic. And so we bought it. We just, we didn't have time to figure out, how do we get the franchisees, how do we put together a system for them to pay for it, and how do we get it to them? We bought as much as we could find. And the picture you see on the right hand side of the slide there is the packing party that one of the 3 packing parties that we've had in the local warehouse, where we just, masks and gloves and gowns, and we would just package those into boxes and ship them to all the franchisees. And so we did that 3 times. And then after that, we were able to put together the online store where the franchisees could go directly and buy this equipment. But interestingly, even in that online store, and this gets at the culture of the company quite a bit. Even in that online store, we're not marking up the PPE that we bought. So we're buying a bunch of it. We weren't doing that before. That was not something that we were doing for the franchisees. We're doing it now, and we're doing it in a way that we're not even profiting off of it. So we're trying. Our goal is to get that out to the franchisees. One of the other things I'll pause here for a minute to talk about on the slide. On the last slide, we talked about, Forbes and Entrepreneur and the annual rankings and how we've showed well in those from a data perspective. This whole slide to me speaks to the culture of the company. And I think as a prospective franchisee, I've been in franchising a long time and talked to a lot of people over the years who have considered, franchising as a next step in their career. And I think one of the common fears is, boy, you know what? I've worked hard for this money, right? I've saved enough that I can afford to look at doing something like this. I don't want to make a mistake in my choice of who I go with, right? I don't want to make a mistake and buy all the fancy marketing stuff and then I get in and it's not really the way that I thought it was going to be. This entire slide to me is a great, great, great reflection of who we are as a company and as the culture, and the culture that we've had here. And this is not new. We've been franchising for 20 years. We've been in business 25 years. But it's a good example, current example for a prospective franchisee like yourself to go through this list and say, wow, the franchise really did embrace this head on, and it's worked. I mean, it really has helped a lot of the franchisees sort of persevere through this difficult time. Okay, a few more things I'll point out on the list here. The Facebook groups. I am not a Facebook guy. I have an account and I don't use it very often, but I've used it more in the last 8 weeks or so than than I ever have. And so one of the things that we realize is that, some people prefer the town hall calls. Some people prefer written communications. That's one of the other things on the list here. We started, and we still to this day, starting in early March and then continuing through this day, we do a written communication to franchisees every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday with all the different updates out there about what's going on with COVID-19. But we also launched these Facebook groups. And so there's a lot of cross-pollination of this information. So things that we talk about in the town hall, some of that makes it into the written, into the written Monday, Wednesday, Friday communications, and some of that makes it into the Facebook groups. The idea is all of this goes out there in a way, and that's not even all the ways, by the way. All this goes out there in many different ways so that the franchisees, however they consume information, they most likely have what they need in front of them as well. A couple other interesting ones here. You see the Littler toolkit with employment resources there, about 2/3 of the way down. So Littler is a law firm based, the office that we work with most often is in Atlanta. They really are they're a big firm and they have a specialty in home care. And so one of the things we've done is we've engaged them, right? And we were already working with them anyway, but we engaged them at a higher level to come and talk to our franchisees on the town hall meetings and also to produce these toolkit type things that you see there as well to make those available to our franchisees. So there's things in there about, like letters you would send to clients, and there's things in there about how do you communicate with caregivers during this time, and all the CARES Act stuff that's being pushed through, and how do you communicate and how do you make sure that you're keeping yourself in compliance. So there's a lot to that. But the Littler toolkit really makes it easy for the franchisees to have what they need from a template perspective for those communications, and also just general information. And let's see, the last thing on the list there, we've never done this, but we did in this case. So we actually offer royalty and brand fund deferment for our existing franchisees. So that was a program that we put in place right away just to try to make it a little bit easier for our franchisees in case they did see any impact from the COVID-19 virus. We wanted to, maybe they have increased expenses and they're buying more PPE, or maybe they lost some clients because the family members now are all locked in their homes, and so they're able to take care. We haven't seen too much of that, but we have seen some of it, and so we just wanted to provide, especially during that uncertain time at that point, we wanted to provide that relief for them. I am happy to report. So initially, you may be wondering how COVID-19 impacted our business, and so I'm really happy to report that we're now kind of back on the upswing. So we did see, roughly a 10% system-wide drop in hours billed. And so that was, as sort of the uncertainty started to hit the shores of our country, there was just nobody really knew what was going to happen. And so now here we are, 10 weeks into it roughly, and we've got just mountains of data that tells us what's happening. And so all of our franchisees are on the same software system, which allows us to do all kinds of data mining and things like that to help us figure out not only what's going on in the system, but what can we do going forward to help the franchisees. And so we're now on our fourth week in a row of growth back up. So we had sort of, several weeks of downward trends, and then now it feels, knock on wood, feels like we're at the bottom. You don't never know what's going to happen in the future, but we're trending back up. So, and you can get into all of that with our franchisees if you go through the process. And eventually, there's a step called validation that you would call and ask them, whatever you want really. But we would even give you a list of sample questions to talk to the franchisees about how COVID has impacted their business. So, overall, here, good stuff. And again, the key message on this slide, as a prospective franchisee, just take it all in and recognize it for an indication of what the culture is like here at Right at Home. All right, I promise you that is my longest slide, I think, that I'm going to talk about. So let's get into the sort of the numbers part of the presentation here. There's so many these that you may have sat through. I've sat through a bunch of them in my career, and it always seems like you have to get to the end of it to be able to get to the real numbers of it. And so we just have got these next couple of slides thrown in here at the very beginning, so you know exactly what what things look like from a numbers perspective. So this first one here, the average net billings. So that's a fancy word for revenue. That just happens to be what we call it. So the revenues, average revenues per office last year, 2019, were 1.3 million, and the gross margin was just over 39%. And so what that means is our gross margin is basically revenues minus the cost of the caregiver. So really strong profitability in our model, and has been that way for years. We've been over $1 million for years in average sales per office, and that gross margin has been in the high 38s, low 39s for many years. And you can actually see that in our latest franchise disclosure document, which goes back, I think it goes back about 10 years to just to show the stability of the business model. Okay, so if the last slide was all about the revenues, the historical revenues, let's talk about the historical costs. And so our estimation, I'm not going to go through these individually, but it anywhere from about $80,000 up to about $150,000 is the average investment in a Right at Home to get one territory started. What I often tell people is that there's probably nobody that did it for the low, because one of the things we do in this analysis is we go back through the franchisees that opened the previous year. We looked at what they spent. So pretty unusual if somebody happened to get the best deal and got all the things in the low column. Probably the same thing on the high column. Probably nobody got the worst deal on furniture and rent and all of that on the high column. So the number tends to be somewhere in the middle, but the range is anywhere from 80 to 150,000. In terms of our, what our network looks like today, you can see going across the graph there in the sort of the center of the screen, the years starting at 2001 on the left and then 2019 on the right. I often joke on this slide that we could, if we were to, we should talk to the folks at Google and say, hey, when people, when they Google, show me a nice smooth growth graph, this should be the one that's in there, because it looks like we took it out of a textbook, but that really is a reflection of our growth in system-wide sales over the years. So, as you can see there, we're coming up on being a $600 million system. COVID will set us back a little bit, but overall, one of the big players in the industry, over 600 locations worldwide, 20 years in franchising, over 80 staff at the corporate office. And you see our handsome founder there, Alan Hager, who started the business back in 1995. So I think the thing to take away from this slide is just that we've got a long history in business. We're not a new company. We've been franchising for over 20 years now, so we're not new at franchising either. And then the other thing I would say about Alan here, and one of the reasons he's on the slide, is Alan is actually a former hospital administrator. And so if you go do a competitive analysis on this industry and you look at the founders of the companies that have started these senior care companies, especially the ones that have any size and scale, we're the only one that has a founder who has a hospital administration background. And the reason that's meaningful is because we understand the whole healthcare continuum because of that experience. It starts with Alan, but then our current team as well also has that experience. And so we're able to understand exactly where home care fits into the overall healthcare continuum. And we've gotten that feedback actually from multiple other companies that we collaborate with that are more, quote unquote, healthcare companies that are in some cases surprised that we're able to speak their language as well as we do. And so that to me is a differentiator for Right at Home. It's I would really want you to think of Right at Home as the healthcare company who happens to use home care or happens to use franchising as their strategy for growth. So good stuff there related to Alan's background. I really like that. He also, by the way, worked as a caregiver before he ever started the business as part of his research. So it's a pretty interesting and colorful background. All right, not going to spend a lot of time on this one. If you don't know by now, we are a home care company. We provide 3 basic levels of care. They build on each other. So companion care is cooking, cleaning, running errands. Anything where you don't touch the client is probably companion care, including playing cards with them. Personal care is touching the client. So it's bathing, showering, taking vitals, dressing, feeding, brushing their teeth, combing their hair, helping them get dressed. Anything in that bucket, so to speak, is going to be personal care. And then we have, probably 15-20% of our franchisees offer some kind of nursing care in the home as well. You don't have to offer that. It's not necessarily required. But we do, if you have interest in going down that path, and after you've got your feet underneath you, if you want to get into nursing, we can help you do that as well. All right. So you may be wondering, what does a Right at Home franchisee do with their time? And so in the short term, it's just everything, right? I mean, when you're a business owner, it's, I think people have this image in their mind that, oh, I'm the owner of the business. I'm going to be on the golf course all day and I'm just going to have people. I'm going to have people that, and long term, short term, you're in there, you've got your sleeves up and you're working. You're involved in hiring and recruiting. You're involved in assessing clients to figure out what their custom care plan is going to look like. Each client that comes to us gets a customized care plan that's specific to them. You're going to follow up with those clients, especially initially, to make sure that you're fulfilling the needs that they had. This next one's a big one. You're going to be really active in the local community and with the referral source. So we have a really sophisticated and popular online presence. But make no mistake about it, this business is a local business, and your success in it is going to be directly tied to your ability to be out there in the local community and build relationships. And then the last thing is, and this is a key part of the business model. Even though I just said you're going to be in there and you're going to have your sleeves up and you're going to be working, your first hire is going to be to hire a staffing coordinator, or sometimes called a care coordinator. And so that person does all the scheduling, answers the phone at the office. They're generally the office manager, while the franchisee is the one out in the community building those relationships and working with client assessments and those kind of things. Now, that's not required. You can flip those 2 roles and you can fulfill the other one and hire the person to go do outside sales. But most of our franchisees would prefer to hire that inside office manager person and then have themselves be the one out in the community. After the startup phase, you'll, and as you start to scale the business and you start to speak the language of home care, you'll really move more into working on the business. And so what that means is you're going to work on scaling the business. You're going to work on scaling your team, putting a structure in place that will allow you to not have to make all the decisions, and putting a structure in place that allows the thing to sort of run without you being involved in every single thing that happens. You'll also start thinking about succession planning and exit strategy. And I know that may be a funny thing to think about here on a call like this, but like with any other investment, you should be looking at the exit strategy and what that might look like for you as far as time frame goes and as far as price goes as well. One of the things that I'm proud to say here at Right at Home, since about 2010 or so, which is when we started tracking it, we've done well over 100 transactions where we've helped our existing franchisees sell their businesses to new buyers. And so that's it's a full circle kind of relationship with us. Most people that come into us have never owned a business before, which means they've never sold one before. And so we're really proud to be able to help them find buyers if we can. And then the last thing on the list there, you see stay active in the community. That's something that is always going to be the case. You're never not going to be active in the community. Okay, there are a lot of people on the support team, and that is the main that's the main purpose of this slide. So I'll focus on the left-hand part of the slide for now. We have a process. It's called Right Start, and it's basically a process that has about 100 and I think there's about 130 tasks on that checklist now that have to happen in order for you to get open. So you establish your office, you go through training, you're going to hire staff, and then those aren't the only things on the list. Obviously, we've just shortened it for the purpose of this slide. But the idea is, we've done this before, and we've done it, almost 500 times. So we've gotten pretty good at it, and we can help you work down that list as well and get your business opened as efficiently and as quickly as possible. On the right side, that's more of the long-term support, but you also have access to that in the short term as well. The key thing to take away from this slide is we've got almost 80 people at the corporate office, and almost all of them do something related to franchising. And so in the beginning, you're going to work through this Right Start process with your business coach, and that business coach is going to go to marketing, and they're going to go to training, and they're going to go to clinical, and they're going to go to all these different departments when you need help to be able to customize the support to you. All right, we're in the home stretch here. There really is only one purpose for this slide, and that is I want everybody on the call to understand that while we've had great success as a business so far, if you look at the graph from a couple of slides ago, all that growth that we've had over the years, it's gone really, really, really well. I really believe the best is yet to come. And if you look on this graph, one of the things that's most meaningful on this graph is this is the population of ages 75 to 79. And so if you look, at the year where the first baby boomer turned 75 is about 2021. And so I say that to say this, we're taking care of 20-some thousand people today, right? We have over, it's closer to 25,000 clients now. So we've got about the same number of caregivers. We've got almost 500 territories operating in the U.S. We've got all of this size and scale, and I don't even think we've scratched the surface yet, because we all know as we age, we tend to need more care, not less, more care as we age. And so we know the sweet spot for our business tends to be 75 and over. And so for us, we're really excited to be able to serve that population. And one of our growth goals and strategies is to put ourselves in a position to serve as many of them, those boomers, as they continue through their retirement years. So we really do believe the best is yet to come. As far as the reasons that people do this, you probably have been through this a little bit as you sort of meandered through and toyed with the thought of business ownership. After spending 20-some years in franchising, I can tell you that most of the reasons I've ever heard for people that do this, the reasons people do this are on the screen. So I think it's some function and combination of, generating income, being fulfilled in what they do, having the flexibility to decide when they're going to go on vacation and when they're going to leave early to see the sons or granddaughters, sporting event or school event or whatever. I think those three are really big ones. I also think that in my conversations with folks over the years, control is a big deal. Those that lived through the 2008 financial crisis and saw the layoffs on the other side of that, I think we're about to see that again. We've got 30 million people that are filing for unemployment. We've got all sorts of uncertainty here. We've got the economy that in many ways has come to a standstill. And so I think there are going to be some people out there, you may be one of them, that are out there sort of looking around saying, how do I put myself in a position to not have to, to be able to have more control and not have to look over my shoulder. Building equity is another one. Boy, it'd be nice if we could just take our jobs and our salaries and sell them when we're done with them. It doesn't work that way, right? And so, when you have your own business, building equity in something and creating a retirement for yourself is certainly something that I've heard over the years. And then this last one I think is key. There's a lot of marketing material and things out there in franchising about about investing in yourself, and there's a lot of truth in it. I think that there are a lot of people that are very capable. They've been honing their skill sets over the years, and now they're able to put it to work for themselves. And so I just would, those of you that are having those kind of thoughts, I would encourage you to pursue those. And then the last thing on the right-hand side of the screen here, FBR stands for Franchise Business Review. We are, we take our franchise relationships very seriously with our franchisees, and so we survey them every year, and just to see how we're doing. It's a long survey. It takes them like 45 minutes to fill the thing out, and I'm happy to report, we've got a 4.4 rating, which is really high out of 5, by the way, not out of 10. It's a 4.4 out of 5 on whether they would recommend this to a friend. And so I just think that's a great endorsement of the franchisees to say, hey, this business model has accomplished what I wanted to. All right. Well, I'm not going to read these testimonials here. We had an ad in an airline magazine earlier this year, and so some of these quotes are here from franchise owners that I'm just going to let sit there for now. That really is the end of the presentation itself. Let me see if I have any questions. So far, the questions, I don't see any questions here, Micah. I don't know if you're able to see them on your end, but maybe if you have a question, go ahead and type it into the Q&A box. And then Micah, if there's something that I went too quickly through, or if there's something that you think I need to be talking about with these folks, I'd be happy to address that as well.
I think you went through everything well. I don't know that there was anything that you missed. Let's give them a couple minutes to put in any questions that they may have that are that weren't necessarily covered by the slides, whether that's support or expectations in your first year, or what if they have any more questions on what training looks like, etc.
Okay. The other thing I'll talk about, I see these smiling faces here on the screen. So I always think it's helpful for people to know, just make that connection, like who are these folks and who were they before they came to Right at Home. So I'll take a few minutes to talk about who they are. So bottom left-hand corner is Bo Green. Bo is he came to us, he was probably very early. Well, you can see in the picture, he's a young guy. So I think he might've been 30 when he came to us, but very driven guy, very business-minded. He actually played NCAA Division I college basketball for the University of Louisville, and then later for Samford down in Alabama. But he's been with us now for several years and has become a leader in our system, and really just was he's just a great resource and has built a great business in Alabama. And then I'm going to pause after Bo, and I see that there is one question in here. What is the process of getting clients and personnel? And so, your question basically is, how do we get clients in the door, and how do we find caregivers? And so it's a good question. Interestingly, I've been with Right at Home about 12 years. In the first few years, I used to have lots and lots of questions about how do I find clients. And I think if you think about back to the slide that had the years on it and the ages. So in the early days, there was a lot more uncertainty about, are there going to be enough clients for this business? And and related to that, I used to get lots of questions about competition as well. I don't get a lot of questions now on are there enough clients. I think that the demographics out there show that there are plenty of people that need these kind of services over their lifetimes. And so the process for getting them is typically it's referral sources. So those are people that have they're in the medical community. There's about 40 some different categories of referral sources that we work with. Anybody that's going to have a trusted, typically medical relationship with a patient is going to be a potential referral source for us. So that's one big category. Another one is online. We've gotten, I could still remember the old website from 2008, and I think many of us may chuckle at that today. We thought it was pretty good back in 2008, but the online piece of it has been huge for us. And so we're proud to say that we have the largest home care related group on LinkedIn. We have a huge presence on Facebook now as well, and some other social media platforms too. So there's sort of when we think about client acquisition, we think about referral sources is the big one. Still, probably over half of the way that you get clients is from those referral sources, and then to a lesser extent, it's going to be online. And then, of course, there's all kinds of other things like referrals of friends and family, and then sometimes we even have competitors that will refer work to us. And then one that might surprise you is that we often see referrals from companies that are called home health companies. And so if you're not that deep into the research of our business yet, there's home care and then there's home health care. And those are not the same thing. So home health typically refers to a home care agency that only gets paid by Medicare. We don't accept Medicare in our in our payment sources, and there's all kinds of reasons for that. One of them is the process to get certified is it takes a lot of time and money and effort. And the second is, we want the client to be in charge of their care. And typically if somebody else is paying the bill, they're going to make decisions about how the care is provided. So I say all that to say this: home health care doesn't understand our business and doesn't really want to understand our business in terms of the way that clients are going to drive the care plan. And so if they get a client in who's not paying with Medicare, who wants a customized plan to them based on their own desires and needs, they'll send that client to us. So we have quite a few of those referrals as well. So as you go out there and look at your market for clients and specifically for competition, don't assume when you do a Google search for home care that those are all competitors. You're going to find that there's quite a few of those that actually are home health care companies, and they're going to be more of a referral source target than a competitor for you. As far as the personnel acquisition, excuse me there, that probably is the biggest hurdle in our business today. And so the reason that I say that is we have so many clients, right? We have our population is aging so much. They call it the silver tsunami. There's all sorts of other just sayings for it, but it's a lot of people that are gonna turn 65, and because families are smaller now, all the baby boomers grew up and had half as many kids, and so now there are fewer people to take care of them in their own family. And so what's happening is it's caused this sort of stretch, if you will, where we have all these clients coming in the top of the funnel, but we need caregivers to take care of them. And so one of the things that we do a lot of career fair things. We partner with nursing schools locally. Indeed.com is another one that we use, and some of the other online sources. We work with several companies that will help us put ads out there in local markets for caregivers as well. But there's a lot of it that's happening online these days too. So, and personal referrals is huge. We talked a lot about as a leadership team about how do we become that employer of choice, right? And interestingly, we just had a meeting yesterday. And so we've been sort of comparing ourselves against the competition. And one of the things we know just in our conversations with them is we're actually, our sort of decline during COVID was less than theirs. And so I made the comment yesterday that, well, why is that? Why is our decline a little less than what some of the competitors are? And basically I said, well, maybe we are the employer of choice at this point. We've been working toward this for a while. Maybe that's it, because I think that some of those other companies potentially just didn't have caregivers to put out there on the cases, and we did, and we were able to fulfill those needs. Okay, so that answers that question. I do have another one here. Do you have physicians that are franchisees? Yes, we do. And are they able to refer patients to their right-at-home business if they own the business and the referring medical practice? Does Stark Law impact that? Yeah, I think Stark Law would impact that. It's for those of you that don't know what that is, there's all sorts of referral laws out there about one business benefiting from another. And so that's probably more detailed than I would want to get into on this call. But I think, if you look in our franchise disclosure document, you do need to adhere to those rules and everything. We want to do everything above board. And so we're probably, whatever the rule is, we're probably going to take the very conservative viewpoint of that, just to make sure that we're in compliance, because one mistake like that could impact a lot of other folks. What is your policy in case I have a client or referral outside of my region? So I'm going to answer that two different ways. I'm going to take region and change it to territory in case that was the intent. And so what is the policy if he has a client or referral outside of his territory? So the way Right at Home territories work is that we cannot open another office in that territory, right? And so that is we call it a designated area. And so we cannot open another franchise in that designated area, and no other franchisee can provide care to anybody else in your designated area without your permission in writing. And if they do, there actually are penalties built into our model for that. So there's lots of protection there and for you. And same thing for marketing, by the way. No other franchisee can really go into your designated area and market. Now, if you market in your designated area to a referral source that has a client that is somewhere outside of your designated area, then there's a couple of other questions to ask. The biggest one is where the client lives, is there another franchisee in that area? And if another franchisee owns that zip code, then you would provide that referral to that franchisee. And that works in reverse too, right? If the other franchisee makes a sales call or whatever and builds a relationship, and that relationship bears fruit of a client in your designated area, you would get that client. And so that's the way that's set up. If that referral though doesn't, if the zip code that referral lives in doesn't have is not owned by a franchisee, in other words, that zip code is an available zip code, you can provide that care all day long. And so, in fact, we give you a blanket letter when you come to the training class that just says you have our permission to work outside your designated area, so long as that area is not owned by another franchisee. Now, I'm going to answer the question that was actually asked, because I think that's relevant as well. What is the policy in case the client or referral lives outside of the region? We have seen a lot of those type of situations happen as well. So the easiest example would be, there's a lot of folks from New York that winter in Florida. And so we've seen franchisees that will refer folks that they've been taken care of in New York that are going to be down in Florida for the winter, or sometimes they're going down there permanently. And so we've seen lots of that happen across the network as well, in terms of just referring people back and forth. Like I said, we've got almost 500 territories operating. We've got most of the top 100 areas has at least one franchisee in it. And so for all those reasons, we have the network out there that you can refer folks to across the region. Now, with that being said, since I brought up territories, I'll take a minute to mention we still have over 300 territories still available. And so even though we have a lot of the top 100 metro areas covered, even in some of those top 100, we still have territories that are still available. So Cleveland's a good example of that, right? We still have territories in Cleveland. We have franchisees there, but we still have territories available. Grand Rapids, Michigan is one that's kind of top of mind for me. We don't have any franchisees in Grand Rapids, and that's a fairly large market, and so we'd like to have a presence there. But we've got over 300 available territories out there for you. If there's anything else on your mind, go ahead and type it into the box. I'm going to go ahead and spend a couple of minutes going through the other franchisees that are on the last slide here. So you see Greg Brewer in the middle. Greg is so much fun. Greg is a franchisee, longtime franchisee down in North Carolina, Winston-Salem. He's a huge Wake Forest fan. Greg worked at Johnson & Johnson before he became a Right at Home franchisee. So he is a self-described corporate man. And so he did that for a long time and decided he wanted to be a business owner. This would have probably been 2007 or 8 or so. Come to the right, you see Megan Scott. I have a huge soft spot for Megan Scott. Megan's father started the business a long time ago, before I was here in 2008. And he passed a couple years ago. And Megan had not, she'd been around the business, but she, wasn't involved in it at that time. And so she took the business over after her dad passed, and has just taken it and has done a great job with it. We're really proud of her. And like I said, I've got a soft spot for Megan. She's done a great job continuing her father's legacy. Coming up above Megan there, we see Renee Concialdi. So Renee's in California, Southern California. And similar story. Renee had a long time corporate career. Her husband Joe and her, they always look like that. By the way, they are two of the happiest people I've ever met, and so they're just always so positive. And what's cool about Renee too is she's gotten involved with our some of our leadership councils that we have available here. And so one of the things that happens that I've noticed here at Right at Home that's similar to the corporate world is that, there's still a home office and there's still an opportunity for franchisees and people to engage outside of their normal day-to-day. And so Renee's been involved with some of our franchise advisory council and some things like that, and has really brought a new perspective to that for us. So it's if you have those kind of aspirations, we're a big enough network that we have those opportunities for you. And then last but not least, over to the left-hand side, that's Lou Myers over there. Lou was a franchisee and is a franchisee back in Maryland. And so Lou is, he was one of our larger franchisees and sold some of his territories here in the last couple of years. And then but is still a franchise owner there, still likes the business. And so he, what I like about him is he had kind of a well thought out exit plan and has, was able to take some of the equity out of his business that he built. And then but he's still able to remain a franchisee and remain part of the system and keep all the relationships and all of that. All right. Well, let's see here. Last question before we wrap up, unless somebody else pops in here. How do we see what territories are available? So if you go to our website at rightathomefranchise.com, there is a tab there for franchise territories that you'll be able to see all of the markets that are still available. So all of those are up, they're real time. So if we have somebody that comes through and is approved and is able to move forward, we'll take it off of that list. But if you see it at rightathomefranchise.com, it is still available. And then if you need care by chance, if you have family members who need care, or you want to see where some of the existing locations are, you can go to rightathome.net. Not rightathomefranchise.com, but rightathome.net, and type in your zip code to see where the closest available office would be. All right. Well, folks, 46 minutes start to finish here. Please do stay engaged with us as a team. We have, going backwards here. We have a great team in our franchise development department to help you as you navigate this process. It's not easy. I know it's a big decision, and I think that just having the experience over the years and seeing people move through this process, it's one where, if you do your homework and you ask all the right questions and you really do a great self-assessment of what you want and what you're capable of, I think it's something that can be one of the most fulfilling things that you ever do. But the process usually takes anywhere from 60 to 100 days or so from the day that you inquire until the day that you sign a franchise agreement. Part of that process is going to include you talking to as many of our current franchisees as you want. And so we tend to be just a very open and transparent company. Hopefully that's coming through here today, and that's came through so far with the communications that we've sent you. But it's the ultimate litmus test, right? Is to talk to our current franchisees and ask them what they think of us, and ask them if they're profitable, and ask them how much money they make, and ask them how COVID's impacted their business. And there's all kinds of good things that you can get into with those types of conversations. But I think they'll help. They help you kind of figure out whether or not it's something that you want to do or not. Ultimately, that's what we want. We just want you to make a good decision for you and your family, and we want your values and all the things that you're looking for to line up with what we have here at Right at Home. All right. Well, one other question before I wrap up. Do you assist with the permitting process? So permitting process, I'm not sure. When I hear permits, I think about zoning and real estate and those kind of things. So I'm not sure if that's the question that you're asking. There's not really, on the real estate side for us, it's a 600 or 800 square foot office. There's typically not rezoning or big build outs or anything like that. So I'm guessing it's not related to that. The only other thing I can think about permitting would be sort of with licensure, right? There are about 33 states that have some kind of licensure requirement for our business. And so we do help with that. We have a clinical staff internally and a standard staff internally as well. And they will absolutely help you go step by step through that whole process. It's not the same for every state. And like I said, there's 17 states that don't have it. But we would absolutely be with you in lockstep there to be able to get you through that process. And so normally, if it's an easier state, it would be 30 days. If it's one of the more difficult ones, it might be a little, 60 or a little more than that. If you live in New York, that's much longer. And there might be another state or two. So yeah, we would work with your development director. They'll have a list of those states and what's required in each one. But typically, for almost all of them that have any kind of licensure at all, it's going to be a 3 to 60 day process in most cases. All right. Well, again, thanks for the participation and attendance for those of you that are here live, and certainly for those that are listening on a recorded basis. Please continue to be engaged with your development director. We want to answer your questions. We want to make sure you're comfortable. And so if there's anything on your mind that you need to know to figure out if this is the right opportunity for you, we would be more than happy to address those for you. From here, you're welcome to reply to the last email that came in. And if you haven't been engaged with one of our development directors in a while, this would be a great time to get re-engaged with them and talk with them about what you'd like to accomplish, just to see if Right at Home might help you do that. All right. Thanks again, everybody. I appreciate your participation and look forward to talking to you all again very soon. Thanks so much.